Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm so thrilled to see your faces and hear voices. And traditionally, when we have an in-person convention, one of our most well-attended workshops are our communication workshops. And we've got Kathleen Moore, and we also have Rebecca Wilson here from Canticle Communications, the communications firm that has worked with the diocese for many, many years. And some of you have worked directly with Canticle as well. Um, but we knew that folks were itching for some additional communication support, especially when all of our gatherings have gone online, and we're so lucky to have Kathleen here to lead us. For those of you who haven't met her, Kathleen has been with Canticle since 2014. She understands church communications and church social media like nobody else because this is her world. In addition to her work with Canticle Communications, Kathleen also serves as the associate priest at St. Mark's Episcopal Church and the Cathedral of St. Paul in Erie, Pennsylvania. So we're just so lucky to have her. I'll let her take it away. Please feel free to send comments or questions in the chat. And we hope, people will really engage and participate.
Thank you so much, Jen. And first, I'm just going to start by saying, Beth entered the waiting room. I'm going to start by saying that once again, you all entered with it looks like with your cameras off. You are welcome, but not required to turn them on. I am an extrovert in a pandemic, so I love seeing your faces and interacting, but again, not required. The other thing is you entered with your microphones on. So I'm going to say the opposite about that. While you do not happen to have anything to say, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, just because we all know at this point that crazy background noise can sometimes get in the way when we're trying to communicate with one another. The last housekeeping item is that we are recording this, so just know that. Remember the background noise? It was like on cue. So someone nicely demonstrated that for me. Yes, if people can keep on mute, if possible, that would be great. I am going to provide plenty of time for us to talk and ask questions and have comments, because that's how I want this to go. Again, my name is Kathleen, and I am really excited to see some familiar names and faces. I think a lot of y'all have been to my workshops before. This is a workshop like no other that I have done with you in this way. So I just, I'm so happy to see all of you, and I'm so sorry, I'm having a brain blip. And yes, and I am aware that as always in these workshops, you may be at different points in your social media and your communications and your places. And so again, that's why it's really important to me that when you feel the need to, please do ask questions, please offer comments, because again, that's going to help us kind of even that out. So I wanted to start out, as I already mentioned for some of you who came in early, it's been a year of change. So my workshop about church social media is going to be really different today than it would have been this time a year ago. There are new ways and opportunities actually to use social media now that we're kind of locked down. This is a time that connection and communication is more important than ever before. We're missing it more than ever before. And so one of the things that I've really been encouraging people to think about is encouraging church to be a means of fostering that kind of connection and communication. And there are lots of ways to do this, but social media is a really, really effective one. It is just one, Zoom is another, right? But it is an effective one, especially in terms of being able to gather and communicate with your own people, with your congregation, but also with other members of the community. So I do want to stop here and say a word about social media. For as long as I've been doing these workshops, there have always been people who I love and appreciate who have come back with that question of, should the church really be involved in these platforms? Toxic things happen, people are harassed. Social media can be not the safest place in the world. And now we know there are all kinds of other questions about social media. There was that documentary, The Social Dilemma, on Netflix. I have seen it. I commend it to all of you. It does unpack some of the ways that social media has led to where we are in this country, to divisions, to misinformation. So I take probably even more seriously than I used to those folks who do caution about, the ways that we use these tools and whether we really ought to be on them. I will say that I think for that there's every reason now, like even more so than before, to actually have these conversations, with your vestries and with your bishops' committees intentionally, and to say, do we want to be in these spaces? And then there are even more sort of additional questions. I'm so sorry, there's a cat in the background who's very upset. He has been fed. And so there's the question of whether you want to be on these platforms, whether you feel it's ethical as your congregation. And then on top of that, there's the question of, okay, so maybe we're okay with, say, being on Facebook, but are we gonna spend money on Facebook anymore? Are we gonna sponsor posts? Is that what we want to do? And so those conversations are for you to make. I can't make them for you. At Canonical, we have a lot of clients and they all are going to make different decisions. We're not going to make those decisions for them. So I'm obviously going to go forward, assuming that you'll make some kind of decision. You have made some kind of decision to continue with at least some of these platforms, but I really did want to make clear that I do recognize and honor that this whether to do it or not, may be a decision this day and age. And I do encourage that kind of thinking and that kind of talk. And I'm also going to say, I am still on social media. I do still use social media for my churches and I use it personally. I have always said this, that it has always been a place that can be dangerous and toxic. And it is still a place where I see these incredibly inspiring moments of connection, communication, and grace. I'm usually not this personal, but one sort of thing that has happened over the pandemic is on TikTok, of all places, for those who are familiar with that platform. I became connected to this woman who's about my age, whose mother has Alzheimer's, and my mother has Alzheimer's as well. And she makes these wonderful videos about her experience with it. Her mother reminds me so much of mine that it's like insane. And so we've connected and we now like chat with each other and have a relationship and share ideas and things that have worked and haven't worked. And I've sent her gifts for her mom, and those have shown up on her TikToks, and that's real. Like, I'm going to go ahead and say that's real. That's real community and real connection. And the kind of thing when I'm communicating on behalf of churches, I want to grab hold of. That way of sort of being the light of the gospel in the world. So both sides. Then I promise I'm going to stop talking and let all of us have a little bit of conversation, but I want to go over the tools we're talking about when I sort of talk about social media, right? So in the description for this workshop, the three sort of biggies were named: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And in my past workshop, I have said, if you sort of have the bandwidth for just one, my answer is still the same. It's Facebook. Facebook is still sort of the most, again, for better or worse, the most mainstream tool. It's the tool that, honestly, the demographics of most of our churches are most likely to use. And it's incredibly user-friendly, both for you as sort of the content creator for your place, but also for your church members, your community members who are looking to it to get information. It really is so dominant at this point that it's, I say this about websites, that if you don't have at least a basic website, that people are going to assume that your place is closed. It's almost gotten to that point on Facebook. It has almost gotten to that point where it's like, if there is no page at all of your place, then people might assume that you are not a going concern. On Facebook, it remains the same, that I recommend a Facebook page for your place. I do not recommend a Facebook group as the primary public presence. There are a couple reasons for that. One is that it's just more of a barrier to entry for newcomers. So if someone, especially in the pandemic, who's not going to be able to walk in your doors, is kind of checking out places, wants to see what they're like. To like a Facebook page is not like a big commitment. Nobody really knows you. Like, it doesn't feel like you're really exposing yourself, your name, your person, to people who are going to like ask you to be on the vestry in a week. Whereas in a group, you really do have to join the group, which exposes who you are, sort of sparks questions and all of that kind of stuff. So that's one reason. The other reason is, I'm really sorry, but Facebook groups can expose the very worst corners of our church world. Dialogue on social media can really be misunderstood and can get real hot real fast. So church fights are never good. Church fights in public on social media are a particularly bad look. And so not only, for our own members, and not only for seekers looking for a church, but also for members of the community, for potential community partners who might want to work with us. That is just not something that we want to put on display. So for those of you, I do still find parishes out there who still sort of their primary presence is a group. If you ever have, if you are one of those and you want to transfer to being a page, please feel free to contact me and I can help you sort of with that process. Now, the follow-up is always, well, we have these groups in the parish that use groups to communicate, to like organize events and things like that. That's fine. I think there are better tools to use for that kind of thing these days. One of my new favorites is Slack. But I would say the main thing there is those groups should not be findable and public facing. So that's the first thing. And the second is, I really encourage congregations to have a policy whereby it is clear that any social media presence, closed group, open group, whatever, that is using your name and or your logo, your imagery, anything like that, that needs to go by someone. Usually the vestry, the bishop's committee, something like that. But to create that culture where it's clear, like just random member of the congregation cannot go out and make sort of this separate Facebook page or group or say, hey, we're not on Instagram, I'm going to start an Instagram feed for our church. Like, that's lovely. And that probably will work out if there's energy there to do it. But it really needs to be something that is an official feed, understood to be in existence by the leadership, and monitored, and so that you know what's going on there. So let's see. I'm gonna pause here for a second because that's sort of my my introduction to sort of the Facebook nuts and bolts. After that, we're going to go over nuts and bolts of a couple other platforms, and then we're going to talk about sort of content and the fun stuff of what you might do on these platforms. So any questions or comments about sort of nuts and bolts of Facebook? Sweet. Yeah, it's kind of old hat now, isn't it? In terms of Instagram, so Instagram is owned by Facebook. So it's now actually a lot easier to integrate both. My cat is trying to climb up onto my desk. So the thing about Instagram is it's a visual storyteller. So this is a really great tool to use if you have someone around with a lot of energy toward, I mean, it doesn't have to be photography, it can be art. And right now, for most people I know, for most places I know, Instagram's a little tough because those that were using it really effectively were using it at events with their people, showing like the, you know, the dynamic and amazing things that were like going on in their parish. And that's not to say it can't be done now, but it's a little harder. And well, again, I'll talk about some of the ways that some of the things you might do in terms of content right now. But again, like when you are sort of together and doing things, Instagram can be a great way to tell the story of your parish without having to like sit down and write, like sort of those really regular posts that show stuff going on can say a lot about your place. And the way when I talk about how sort of they work together, like it's super easy now if you have an Instagram for your parish to have those posts automatically show up on Facebook if that's what you want to do. So that's just one other tool to use. Twitter. I think at the last in-person convention, I said this, and so I will say it again. Increasingly, especially in the church, and some of you may experience this, Twitter is becoming a really tricky place, and it's becoming a little bit of a mean and toxic place. And I hate to report that that is happening specifically in Episcopal Twitter and in what's called Anglican Twitter. It's can be a little tough. So that is one note just to know. And so for that reason, we don't really recommend that our clients spend a lot of time on there anymore. Certainly it's fine to go on there and put an announcement or something like that if you want to, but engaging in sort of conversations, especially around church on Twitter right now is, I think people are taking a lot of their pandemic sadness out in that forum, and none of you needs that. So that's one thing about Twitter. The other thing is really now, I guess it's been a couple of years now, that we realized that Twitter really is in the way that Facebook works quite well for institutions. So if you're a church or a diocese or a company, Facebook is designed to make it work. That is what they're there to do. So speaking with sort of an institutional voice as St. John's works really well on Facebook. It also works well on Instagram. It isn't effective on Twitter. It just really isn't. I mean, you can have a Twitter feed for your church. You can put your announcements on there. Generally, folks find that it just doesn't get a lot of attention. There was a study a few years ago that talked about reporters and the difference between, so if you have a New York Times reporter, if the New York Times posts a story, and that reporter who wrote it posts the same story, the reporter is going to get more engagement from their feed. So again, I mean, even with these giant organizations, like Twitter is really about sort of the personal. So for that reason, the single sort of productive way, if you do want to use Twitter for your parish, is it is still a place to engage with those journalists, to engage with sort of local folks in that way. But again, if you do that, it's going to be more effective if you're there as yourself. So either as if you're just there as yourself and you happen to be the senior warden or the communications person or the admin or the rector or whoever for your church, but because you really can, if you tag, especially if you're in a smaller place. I don't know how well this is going to work right in Chicago, but who knows? You never know. It's worth a try if you tag a reporter and you say, and especially if you know this is their beat, and you say, hey, we're doing this forum on racial justice, or we're doing this forum on public health. You may have a little luck there, and you may end up having them show up at your place to do an interview. It has happened to me. So that is still one positive use of Twitter. Does anyone have any questions about that, about Twitter, about Instagram, or comments? Ugh, so much listening to myself talk. Okay, we'll get to the fun part and then you'll have more to say.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
This is Jenny Hewlin. You mentioned that Facebook is kind of aligned with demographics of most congregations. Um, and I can see that as a good thing, and I can see that as maybe a not so good thing,
Right.
depending on, if we want to keep. Could you just comment on that? I guess I'll just
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that's a really good way to put it, right? And let's be real, like what we're talking about is women. And we're talking about, women middle to older, my age. Um, and again, that's not everyone on Facebook, but that's largely who is on Facebook. For those of you who have kids, they might have an account, but they probably don't spend a lot of time on there, and they probably use it for like professional things because they have to, or maybe school things. So yes, the good part of that is that it tends to reach our people, and it tends to reach our potential people in that way, in that demographic that's kind of comfortable and known to us. And the next piece that I'm actually going to talk about is, of course, then we have places where there are people perhaps of different demographics, of younger demographics that we might not be reaching on Facebook. So for example, TikTok. And what I always say, there's always a new one every sort of one of these workshops I give. There was Snapchat, now there's TikTok. There, next year there will be something else. And I think it's wonderful for churches to be on these platforms. I mean, I know some of you may have heard of David Peters, who's like the TikTok priest. He's an Episcopal priest in Texas, and he's been really successful with what he's done. Absolutely, he has a church plant there. I am quite sure that people have shown up there because they've seen him on Instagram or on Snapchat and realized, oh my gosh, this guy's here. I'm quite sure. He had a really good working understanding of that platform before he was able to do that. And so that's what I always say. It's like, if you're going to be on these tools, do that if they're comfortable to you, if you love them, if they're natural, if there's energy and time for it, right? So it's basically like, if you've got someone at your place, whether they're on staff or a member, who says, you know what, I think there's just so much opportunity in this platform, and I have so many ideas for like consistent communication for our church, that's what you want. Sometimes we see really well-meaning churches being like, TikTok's so hot right now, trying to get on there. And it's like, I see Jen, it's like, again, anyone with kids, I'm sure, can understand what I'm talking about here. It's like the adults have entered the room and they don't understand what they're doing. So I hope that answers a little bit of your question, Jenny. Like, it's a bit of a predicament. Like, yes, like, get on the new fun things if you've got the people to do that. But yeah, if it's going to be inauthentic, and that's not what church should ever be. And also the people who you're trying to reach that way can sniff that out immediately. So
Kathleen, they'll just move on to the next platform. We'll chase them off TikTok.
I know, like the moment I know, now that I'm on TikTok, I'm like, yeah, I mean, now it's that the moment I was on it, it's over. Now my dad is on it. So it's like, really, it's done.
It was good while it lasted.
Right, exactly. Now that my dad's on it, really is probably time for the church to get on it. So anything else on that? All right. So as I said, I mean, the weird thing, I never want to say, there is no way in which this pandemic is good. And we can try to find ways that that there are opportunities, again, for us as church to be, and again, through social media, to be connectors. So in terms of what we're doing on social media, I know what a lot of y'all are doing, and that's worship. And that's great. Some people are doing Zoom worship that they then stream to Facebook. Some people are doing worship that is just straight live streamed onto Facebook. Some people are doing worship that they upload to Facebook. And that is all good. There are two things I want to say about that. One is that Facebook video view numbers can be a little deceiving. They count a view, sort of those first blush views that you see can look really exciting. Facebook is telling you, I think it's 3 seconds, I believe. 3-second views count as those, right? So when you're talking about a worship video and you're thinking about sort of how, like whether that has really been engaged with, pay attention to those numbers. If you dig down into the Facebook analytics, you can find a little bit more about who's actually stuck around for a larger percentage of the video. So that's not to say don't do it if it's not getting like a ton of engagement, but it is anything you do on social media or with worship in general, you want to sit down and look at it and say, okay, are people really taking something from this? And look at the data, and from your best guess, that can tell you, okay, so like for the next season, maybe we'll try this. So again, that's just something to think about. Some parishes have had incredible things happen, and some of you may have these stories of like people finding their Facebook worship and like hooking into the parish and like basically becoming members like during the pandemic. So that's incredible. So don't stop doing it. And know that like engagement with worship on social media is a little different than engagement with worship on this platform. And again, probably most of us know that at this point. Yes, Kathy.
Can you talk a little bit about, more specifically about what to look for? I am an admin on our Facebook page, and we do primarily stream through Facebook for our Sunday services, but I'm not always sure what to look for. What should I should be examining? What data?
Absolutely, Kathy. And I actually thank you, Emmy Ecklis, who's saying 3-second, 10-second, 1-minute engagements and live viewers. So yeah, I mean, I actually have a document that I can, that's a little bit of a working document that I can send you after this. Facebook, I don't love what they tell you because it's not very much. They will not tell you precisely sort of how many people watched, how many minutes, but you can get a better idea at least of who watched 1 minute or more. And to me, like, because the problem is like, those 3 seconds, it's like, that's just someone scrolling through. So yeah, I can post, or hopefully some way we can figure out a way, because we have the Zoom registrations, to send that document. I probably should have had it ready to post.
Kathleen, yeah. I've got it ready. Do you want me to post it in the chat?
Oh, okay. Look at that. Yay. Magic. So yes, hopefully that'll help, Kathy. That document also has ways of looking at YouTube, as well as Zoom meeting and webinar. So the other thing about Facebook worship is, again, what is a good, well, so that's interesting. The question is, what is a good length of time for people to view? So for a worship service, and again, Facebook is not going to tell you this. It's not going to tell you precisely. Zoom will. YouTube will give you more information. But like, that's what you really, like, as far as I'm concerned, if you're really looking at whether people have experienced your worship service, it's going to be most of the service, like based on the number of the minutes the service is. It's not like a fun YouTube video or like a meme video. It's worship. So, which is a little different from like content. So again, I mean, people like, that's really like opinion thing of mine. So like, take it with a grain of salt. But right, like if I was talking about like a fun videos that your church is making sort of as like feel good entertainment for your community, stuff like that, then I would say, oh, like, you know, if they hang in there for 30 seconds a minute, like that's great. But for worship, it's kind of like you go to church, you kind of stay. Hopefully you stay through the sermon or you leave midway through the sermon. But yeah, so that's sort of my opinion. But again, so what I would say to you, Carol, is like, sort of figure that, like, think about that for yourself in terms, if you're really asking about worship. And then, you know, and then judge from there. The other thing I want to say about worship on Facebook and any social media tool, but particularly Facebook, is that Even though, you may not get as much engagement with your sort of big Sunday morning show, I have heard, I've done some of these workshops in different places, again, in pandemic times, and I'm in the church on the ground. And so I have heard from more people than I would have expected that having like a daily service, and I was part of this for a while in my former diocese, having a daily service, particularly in the evening, seems to be a comfort to people if it's at the same time. And that can be on any format, but even on Facebook, I have heard that is a real comfort. It may not be your whole congregation, but this is church, so we know. It's like, I have a friend who does Compline every night on Facebook, and it's not many people, but it's the same people. And again, in this time, if that's what's like holding these people together, or at least a part of it, like if it's 5 people who are there every night and it's like, all right, this is my thing, these are my people who are here and present with me in some way at 8 o'clock every night, that may be worth it, right? Or that's certainly worth it to me anyway, if I knew that, if I had that much data. So that's what's weird about sort of the measurement of these worship things, is that, in some cases, 5 people viewing for a 5-minute service may be worth the effort. But yeah, if you're talking a Sunday morning service where that's like an hour long on Facebook and you're getting quite a few people who are watching for 3 seconds, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Really good question from Christina about how often to post is appropriate as a rule. What about IG and Facebook stories? Oh my gosh, stories is like the big thing that every single social media channel has now replicated, even Twitter. Like they all have their version of stories, which basically is, so Instagram stories, you have your Instagram posts, and the same is for Facebook, that show up in sort of the feed. And then you have these things called stories, which are supposed to be sort of more in the moment. So they kind of show up and there are these moments in your day. And I know this is unsatisfying, but I'm going to go back to my former, what I said about these sort of new social media platforms. It's just like that. If you've got someone who's like a really clever, good storyteller, who can kind of think about on behalf of your place, like what would be a really cool way to kind of through the day tell a story, then that's great. If you don't have that, I would probably leave it alone, but that doesn't mean forever. Like the thing about stories is you might say, like this just came to me, like what if you did, because Holy Week is on the horizon, what if you did the watch using Instagram stories, like every hour? There was like, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, right? Like if you have a creative idea, that's very cool for that format. But otherwise, it's something at your disposal if you want. Sorry, I'm watching the chat. And in terms of what's appropriate to post, so that's often a question, sort of the how often to post on, say, Facebook. And one of the things I always say is like, as I said about if people come onto Facebook in your places and on there, they're going to think you're not a going concern. The same goes for if they go on there, they find your page and you haven't posted since Christmas. So again, there's no like hard and fast rule, but I would say at least once a week, if you can post. You're probably going to post more than once a week because most places have something to post on Sunday, whether it's a sermon, or the service itself or whatever, and then probably something else through the, sometime during the week would be great. That's not to say you can't post more than that, but sort of that weekly pattern so that when someone goes on and checks you out, they can say, okay, they're here. They've been here this week is great. And then I would say, probably not much more than 2 posts a day. You definitely don't want to sort of what I always say, step on yourself. Like you don't want to post 2 posts within 20 minutes of each other. Definitely time them out if you're going to do more than one in a day. But yeah, there's no real rule. It's just and again, it's also about experimenting, right? And seeing who likes it, looking at your metrics, looking at your likes and see how it goes. My background is in television network scheduling. And so one thing that can be really fun that people do respond to is if you had something like a weekly photograph or a weekly reflection or something like that, to do that on the same day of the week is a really good idea. People are creatures of habit. And so that is like, I would recommend that. If it's at the same kind of time of day, morning, evening, even better. So those are my thoughts about that. And we had a spur of the moment prayer time on Facebook starting January 6th that brought people in from outside our church. Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's so many amazing stories of how people have been brought in during this time. It's fantastic. So again, that's why I don't want to discourage at all Facebook worship, because it's so interesting because it's probably not the best tool for sort of your existing membership, sort of as the most engaging, I don't know, facsimile of being in person at church. And it seems to be a way that people who are not already existing members find their way to you. So tips and tricks for building an audience. Thank you. So yes, I am going to go in and I'll stop again to let people give their experiences, ideas, and questions. But I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the kind of content that might work for you, that you might explore. So the other thing about this time is there are a lot of really important messages to get out from organizations in your community. And they don't have, just like us, they don't have the same ways of getting out messages. And a lot of those messages are about changes in their procedure. So if you've got like, say, a public health organization, or like even with vaccines, things like that, who are the people in your community that you can be helping out and amplifying their message? So this is a great excuse during this time to get on the phone and call organizations in your community and start forming relationships with them if you don't already have them, and saying, hey, listen, we have this Facebook page. It has a little bit of a following. It definitely has the attention of our members. Is there something that we can help get the message out about? Food pantry. If the food pantry's hours are different, procedures are different, if it needs donations, that kind of thing. Let's see. Oh yes, Gloria, that's a really good point. Gloria says, we have people who have very fragile internet. They have better luck accessing worship uploaded to Facebook or YouTube. That happens. We've got someone at one of my parishes who has to watch the sort of stream on the YouTube instead of on Zoom, because they can never get on Zoom. So that's also a very good point. Very good reason to keep doing that. So yes, community partners, it's a great time to reach out to them and ask them, say, how can, is there any way we can help in social media or otherwise? The other thing is, some of you may remember at the beginning of social media, there was this like really hot phrase called user-generated content, which now makes me feel really old. It's like such an old school term. And I've kind of gone back to it because I think it's something that is really beautiful when the church leans on, and it doesn't lean on it enough. So especially right now, really cool things can happen if you reach out to your members and have them create your content, so that then what they're seeing mirrored back to them is themselves as a community having created something beautiful. So, example. I have a friend in California who is doing user-generated Lenten devotions. And so it took a lot of planning. So he started this, maybe a month back, and put a call out both on Facebook and in the parish email and on the website and on Sunday to say, you all are making the Lenten devotional this year. And so for every day, he had a word, sort of like the Advent word thing, but for Lent. And he had a sign-up sheet. And for every day in Lent, a member has signed up. And the assignment was create anything that you associate with that word. So it could be art, it could be a poem, it could be a reflection. And so then what will happen through Lent is every day. That's their content that's going to go out to their community, and it's all created by them. So that's one example. And it just is the way of the world. You're gonna get more more interaction and engagement when it's the people who are interested. That's why local commercials feature the owners of the car dealerships. It's easy to sell those if you're a station, but it's also not, it's not for total selfish reasons. I mean, when you put it together as this is the Lenten devotional created by this community, overall, like, what a beautiful thing. It shows what you are in all of your difference, but also in all of your unity as a Christ-centered community. It's just, I love that stuff. It's very cool. Another example from this same person, and I I really have to give him much credit, for Holy Week, is to have, if you've got, and this can be children or adults, he did it with children, but would be great with adults, was to create a Stations of the Cross. And so you have people draw the different stations or paint, create art, send just a photo of it. And then you can create, and you can have different people in your congregation narrate it. And then if you have someone with the skills, make a video and put that out. And again, what's so neat about that is, like, it's visually compelling. So it may well get attention sort of beyond your community and say a little bit about what you're about. It's also going to get a whole lot of engagement and shares by friends, like, that's something, like, if it were me who was a member of a parish and I contributed to that, I would share it, and my friends would see it. And so that's just a really one other effective way. Choirs in this time of our lives have been amazing at this, right? Like, if you're in one of those parishes that has one of those choirs able to figure out the digital choir, I know nothing about this. That is the coolest thing. And you can see it when, I don't know if any of you have parishes that have done this, but when you put those things on social media, they go wild because they're beautiful, because they involve people and show people and their talent that we know and love. And they tell the story that this is a living community that is still together in a really different way. Let's see. The other thing I've been toying with that I have not done, but again, just sort of thinking in terms of these ideas, is so when I do coffee hour on Zoom, I come up with a prompt every week. And I've started to think, like, those prompts might not be bad on Facebook. So just an open-ended question or a request for photos. So like one of my last coffee hours, it was completely inspired by the inauguration, and the giant Biden Bible was for folks to bring a Bible that means something to them, that's in their house, to the computer and show it off. I really wanted to call it the Biden Bible Challenge, but but I didn't. But how fun would it be to put that on Facebook, and it would not need to be an exclusive call to your members to say, hey, like, have you got a cool Bible lying around? Take a picture and post it here. Again, a fun way to promote a sense of community and engagement, and one that's not closed. That's the thing about social media, one that's not like we're asking for, St. Stephen's Bibles. Like, we want to know, do you have a family Bible like that? Or is, what's in your Bible? Everyone had these cool things. So again, just to help you think in those terms, that these messages that aren't, we used to share like interesting articles and newsletters, and those are still, and news pieces, and those are still great. But if you can get your people involved so that the story is this, like, what you're telling is not, some of it can be, this is the rector, but mostly that the story is, this is our place, these are our people, and look what they did. Let's see. And one other thing is, some people are having cool forums during this time. Like, this is the same thing. If you've got members who have cool jobs, like any kind of cool job, or just interesting volunteer work they do, anything they can talk about, like, that's a great thing to do. Get them on Zoom. If the topic is of real interest to that you think to your wider community. Again, if it's something like, say, you've got someone in public health, if it's someone who can speak to racial justice, then what you might consider is making that a public event. So you have it on Zoom, it's sponsored by your church, and again, it's sort of a forum, and you plan to stream it on Facebook. The difference is you don't just advertise it in your newsletter, you advertise it out to the community. This is where the other way goes. Like, you might reach out to partners that you work with, organizations, other churches, other faith communities in your community, and say, hey, will you share this announcement? And then you've got your whole community understanding you as a place for really interesting, open conversations and learning. And again, that's like, for a little place, that would have been a hard thing to pull off in IRL, in real life. But online, it's a little bit easier. If you've got someone who's, I mean, again, you never know, like, does one of your parishioners have a cousin who's like, some scholar, like the top scholar in a really relevant area? Like, now, if they're willing to do it, you can do that, and you can have a vestry member or something in conversation with them. So that's like a weird gift of this time. And I actually hope that's something that we bring into the future, to remember that we don't always have to program ourselves around the people who are physically here with us. I will say one last thing before I open again, which is that that example of, okay, say you're hosting this really cool forum and you want people to promote it. You want to have a nice looking graphic for that. And most of you probably know by now, there's this wonderful tool called Canva. It's awesome. You do not have to be any kind of graphics expert, and it can make things look really good and clean and professional. And I just, if you're not already using that, that's the thing to use. The other really great thing is it's on the web, like it's web-based, and it has all of the sizes for social media built in. So if what you want to do is create a Facebook post graphic, it has that built in. So it's fantastic. The spelling of the tool is Canva. Canva. And I'm catching up on this. Jen says, is there any guidance on sharing TEC, Bishop Curry's posts, etc.? Yeah, I mean, there's guidance from me. That ties back to that question of how often to post. Lean on those resources, lean on diocesan resources, on Episcopal Church resources, so that you don't have to be constantly coming up with this programming. Like, all of this creative stuff I'm talking about is awesome, and that's the goal. But you're not going to be doing that like 3 times a week, right? So use that. Yes, when the presiding bishop does most anything, use that, share that. He is gifted in so many areas, and compelling video is one of them. And, I don't know about you all, but he is someone who effectively seems to speak to the wider community, not just to the Episcopal Church. There is interest in him. So definitely make use of that. That is content that is there for you. And thank you both. Thank you, Rebecca and Jen, for posting Canva. Anyone else? I'm looking not just for questions, but if anyone has, I always use these to find my own ideas to then take and give to my next workshop or use at my own church. Does anyone have questions, and has anyone done really cool things that would be great for the rest of us to hear?
I have a question again.
Yeah.
What kind of concern do we need to have for copyright when we're posting things?
Yes, that's a really good question. So many of you probably from worship are aware that that obviously music, you have to have your copyrights all set for streaming if you're going to stream your worship on Facebook. So we probably know that much. The same goes for art. If you're sort of projecting hymns like with art, You want to make sure that it's art that's in the public domain. There are different resources to find art like that. There's and Rebecca may be ready with this link. There's the Vanderbilt Archive, which is particularly good because you can look at them by the lectionary. So you can like find the Sunday you're on. It's fantastic. And you've got this like selection of pieces of art to choose from. So yeah, you want to definitely pay attention to music and art. Like if you're creating your own stuff. I mean, that's another real great reason to use user-generated content, because of course that all belongs to you. As always with children, you want to make sure you've got releases, but again, that's a little, you still want them, but also like, there's not going to be a question, it's not like when you take pictures at the parish picnic and then you have to go and ask the parents. In these cases, it's like the children have made a video that you have asked for and the parents are sending it to you. So it's like, again, you still want to make sure you have permission to share it expressly on social media. And again, it's a little less like there's not going to be this unclear element that there sometimes is when we're in person. In terms of sharing, like it can be a little tricky. Like you cannot go onto the internet and find a fun video and download it from somewhere and then re-upload it right to your Facebook page as your content. But if you see a Facebook video or a video on Facebook that has been shared like by another church, by the Episcopal Church, by some kind of a not-for-profit organization that's aligned with your values, you can hit the share button on Facebook. That's what it's for. So obviously in those cases, you don't have to worry about copyright because that's the share function of Facebook and it very clearly says where it's coming from. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Kathleen, I'll just say that the one place that we find that folks run into trouble with copyright and photographs is when there's a really popular photo in the news or a photo of a news event, the inauguration or something that's happened in your community, and the local newspaper prints a photo or the New York Times prints a photo, and it's everywhere, right? You see it everywhere. And so it feels like we can just use it. And that's where we really run into trouble because you can't. And we actually have several times over the course of our work. Yeah, Bernie, right? Bernie, but churches really did kind of run into the rails with Bernie a little bit this time because it's not really appropriate to post a Jewish man sitting in a church, but a lot of churches did and then kind of had to walk that back. But we have several times in the course of our work with various clients received legal notices saying, hey, you've got a photo on your website. Somebody had done a blog post or whatever. There's a photo on your website that is under copyright. You don't have permission to use it. If it's not down within 24 hours, we're taking the site or we're sending you a big bill. So those things do happen, and they do happen to churches. It's not just this sort of abstract concern. So that is the one place we really ask folks to be careful, is in using photos that have been taken by a professional photographer, either for news purposes or art purposes, which is unfortunate because sometimes we really want to use them to illustrate what we're saying, but we just can't.
Thank you. I knew there was a big piece I was missing there. There are a couple ways, not in no way, never try to get around it, but it's like, say you really wanted to say something about Amanda Gorman, you can take a link from the New York Times or something like that, stick that in your Facebook post, and that photo will show up on your post with that link to the New York Times. And then in the text, if you're wanting to say something about Amanda Gorman, you can do that in the actual post and the photo will be there along with the link to whatever the Times story is. So, again, that's not ideal, but there is a way to have the photo be there. But yeah, thank you, Rebecca. That's really important. Jim.
Hi, just a question about the copyrights. What about memes?
That's a really good question. So again, well, yeah. So can you say more like about sort of taking a meme? Like, I don't want to use Bernie because again, that has like a whole separate issue around it. But well, I don't know, any given meme and sort of creating your own. Yeah.
No, no, it would be, they're just memes and social media that are out there. I mean, there's websites with memes on them,
Right. Meme
for
generator.
example, that people use
Yeah.
and repost on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of copyright? I really don't know the answer.
Yeah, I periodically see memes out there and I think you don't have permission to use that photo. So I'd have to look at any specific meme generator and what the terms are and whether they regulate in any way the photos that are uploaded. But I just say don't upload anything to a meme generator that you wouldn't have permission to use, just, you know, as it is. There are some really good sites where you can get good photos to illustrate things. Unsplash is one of them. Do folks know Unsplash? I'll put that in the,
I got
so
it.
I put, oh, thank you, sorry. So I put in the chat the Vanderbilt Art in the Christian Tradition link, and that's really good if you're looking for anything to illustrate a service, a liturgical event, you know, something like that. But Unsplash is just a lot of really good photos. I just recently, my parish is, we're having people drive up to, because we're closed. We've been closed since last March, our building. So we're having people drive up on the curb, drop off the soup that they would usually bring to church for the food pantry on Super Bowl Sunday, right? Super Bowl soup, you get it. And pick up a bag with pancake mix for Shrove Tuesday because we're having a virtual thing, and Ashes for Ash Wednesday because we're having a virtual thing. And so I wanted the post and the newsletter item to pop a little bit. So I went on Unsplash and downloaded a picture of a bunch of cans of soup. And you can use that for, I could make a meme out of it if I wanted to make a soup meme. So you can look around the internet. Wikipedia or Wikimedia, which feeds a lot of images to Wikipedia, is another really good place. Almost always, not always, but almost always, pictures on Wikipedia that are illustrating something are in the public domain. And so you can use those too. So once you start to know places you can go to find free photos, you can get creative and make memes or illustrate posts or, you know, do what you want to do with them.
And a really good question from Carol about screenshots of videos. So the same goes, if it's your own video, of course, but if it's a video that belongs to someone else, no. It's just like using a photo. Anyone else? I have this feeling someone here has done something cool and aren't sharing it with us.
I thought it was a cool thing for the Christmas Eve service. Some of us took individual little wine that had been blessed and wafers and sent them or gave them out to the community, to our church family, so that they could do communion during the Christmas Eve service that was, you know, being live streamed. So that was pretty cool, I thought.
Awesome. Gloria, I see your actual hand raised.
I really liked the ideas that were given for like the Holy Week Stations of the Cross and devotions and all of that kind of a thing. The only thing we've done so far that might fit into that category is that during our fall pledge campaign, when we have people who will do a testimony about the church, we did record those. Well, they were on Zoom anyway at that point, and so I edited the Zoom and posted their 3-minute talks. The other thing we did was prior to the election, that novena that Bishop Curry was talking about, we did each of the 9 nights and posted those and got people who we hadn't gotten in other things. Most of them were local, most of them were from our own church, but it sort of went along with what you said about having something that's the same time every night that is comforting for people. And so that I think is something we should repeat, something similar to that.
Yeah, that reminds me too, that's very cool, is that there are 2 things about sort of getting your people involved with this kind of stuff. The first is that I too am working right now as we speak on an annual meeting video for one of my places. And it's very much like that, with videos of testimonies of people talking about the place. And some of the people in there were perfectly capable of taking out their iPhone and doing a video themselves and getting it to me. Some were not. And so a trick to that, to get those people who are not quite there yet, is to get them on Zoom and put it in speaker view and hit record. And then you've got the video and you've got it ready to go, and you edit and you do whatever you need to do with it. So that's one little trick. And the other thing I want to say about this stuff is, like, it does not need to exclude people who are not online at all. So, I know another example that I didn't think of from way back in the pandemic was a church that I served, and the rector there essentially had people it was a writing exercise. And so and everyone sort of contributed. And so what it resulted in was a book. And it was really beautiful. It was sort of this creative book of sort of reflections. And so that was primarily a digital product that was then shared with the parish, shared on social media, but it also was actually printed. It was both people who were not online both contributed to it and got a paper copy of it. So there are ways to include people if you know you've got those folks in your congregation. And so all it means, though, is you have to know you have them. So you have to call them on the phone and say, this is what we're doing. This is the assignment. Please do it. Mail it to me. So it takes that extra work, but I know that's really important for some of our parishes to make sure that those people feel involved and included in that way. And also I'll find, for parishes that we've been meeting online for so long now, and if there really are those people who are only joining on the phone and all of those things, like there seems to be great delight, right, when there's some sort of group thing that has included someone that they haven't been able to really see in a while in the same way that they've been able to see others. What about advertising some selected posts for broader reach? This is a low cost, easy option. How do you think this is perceived by parishioners? Good question, because there's actually a lot of elements to it. The first is this new element of, you got to decide if you want to give Facebook that money. And I'm not saying either way, but it's like, I didn't think about, I probably should have, but I didn't think about that years ago, and I do now. So that's your first question. The second is that absolutely, if you do decide to do that, it is quite effective. It is amazing, especially if you're in smaller communities. Just a little bit of money that you sponsor a post, particularly on Facebook, will make a difference. And will get to people outside of your immediate congregation. And a couple of ways that I could see that could be really, really useful is if, for example, you are doing something like a forum that has broad appeal that you really are interested in the community being a part of. Another is if, you're really trying to help an organization get out some kind of public information, and you one of the ways you're really going to help is taking a little tiny bit of your budget and putting it behind posts about that. Another way, and I'm really starting to think about this at this point, is putting a little bit of money behind promoting your Easter service, your online Easter service. I've had luck in the past promoting Christmas and Easter services with a little bit with sponsoring on Facebook and having people show up in real life. And so it would stand to reason that would probably result in some folks coming on Zoom. not sure, but I would be interested to see. So, but yes, it does work because it's their model, right? So, so it does work. We have good luck. Kimberly says, we have good luck with Sign Up Genius for 10 people at a time, spread out over a time to come receive a blessing. Kimberly, are you available to take yourself off mute and say more? Maybe not.
Hi, no, I'm here.
Hi.
Well, we used the app Sign Up Genius,
Mhm.
and we offered our parishioners to be able to sign up. Like 10 people would sign up from 5 to 6. They would come in person into the church, and we would give them a special blessing. We used this on Christmas Eve, and it worked very well. So that we could just kind of reach out and give our parishioners that comfort of coming into our nave.
So did that go on social media?
Yeah, we put the Sign Up Genius through our social media. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah. Just a thought.
Yeah. We're closed here in Northwestern Pennsylvania, but
we're in Chicago.
Yeah.
We had a really successful project a couple months ago. My name's Devin Sweeting. I'm with Grace Episcopal in Oak Park.
Hi, Devin.
I run the Instagram and I'm on the communications. But one of the things that we do traditionally at Christmas is we have a Boar's Head concert, which is our youth choir. And they were really upset about not being able to do it. And so we did it. So we moved the entire thing digital. It's a play. They wear Renaissance costumes. Typically we serve dinner. It's this massive thing that we do every year. And so we moved the whole thing online. We had the costumes delivered to the kids. We guessed what size they would be this year. We delivered the costumes. We recorded the entire play on Zoom. They sang 10 songs, some of which they decided they wanted to do. The musician was like, that's too many. And the kids said, no, we're doing them. And so they self-recorded, self-edited. One of the youth choir members edited the entire video. They made little cartoons to go in the middle for intermission. And then we made a booklet of all the recipes that would have been served this year. And we sent all of that out. But the thing we did on social media was every day leading up to when it happened, we advertised it. We did Throwback Thursday. We put one of the recipes up. We put a surprise video of some of the kids singing. We put the costumes up. And the Instagram is not, we just started it. It's getting there. It's getting there, But the Facebook did really well. And much to our surprise, we got emails asking what hashtags were we using? How did we want it tagged? And our congregation loved it. We ended up getting people we don't know. We don't know who they're connected to. People's workplaces asked for the video so they could send it to family friends and things like that. And we were also able to raise almost $600 for the kids choir to function with more technology and everything this year, which is a lot to do with the willpower of these kids, but it was incredibly successful for us. And it's something we're thinking about. How do we capitalize on the content creation of people with energy?
Devin, that is so awesome. You got something going when people are asking for the hashtag. So that is, congratulations. That sounds amazing.
The look on the first time we got the email that was what's the hashtag? And I was like, we forgot to make a hashtag.
Been there. I have literally been there. That's awesome. And also a reminder that particularly for those of us who have young people in our congregations, they know how to do all of this. They know how to do all of this, the editing and animation. It's just remarkable. And this is a time to let them do their thing if they have energy for it. So very cool. Jim, you have your hand raised. I don't know. I think he might have it raised by mistake. Anyone else?
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute. I'm
Oh, no
I'm not a
problem.
millennial. I'm not a millennial. So,
Good for you.
Devon, what church are, Devon, what church are you with?
Oh, you're on mute. And now I feel bad because I called you Devin.
Oh no, it is Devon. It's
Oh,
a
okay.
Chicago thing. We have a street Devon. So that's where that comes from. I'm at Grace Episcopal in Oak Park, near West Suburbs.
Okay, just, do you mind if we contact you? Well, I'm St. Paul's in McHenry. If we
You're
contact you
more
in the
than
future?
welcome to.
Okay,
Yeah. Our church, everything on our website is up to date. Necessary, so I don't know if my email's on there. But our parish musician has all of that as well. Our information is completely up to date.
understand. Okay, thank you. It just, that's some exciting stuff. Content really brings people in. So
Yeah.
excuse the background noise. I'm in a motel. I shouldn't say this. We're going to Florida. So anyway, we've already had COVID, so we're going to Florida. So, okay. Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much for that. You know, I'll be honest, given what my workshops are generally about, I consider it a success if a connection is made. So thank you, Jim and Devin. That's always my aim. So learn from each other, because usually there are folks not too far away doing incredible things that we can all learn from. Anyone else? Questions, ideas? All right. I'm not sure when we were supposed to end, but we can certainly let folks go. Jen?
We're a little bit over our time. I just
Oh, we're
realized I
over.
was getting so caught up in the discussion.
Even better, I was worried that I was supposed to fill till 8:30. So
No. So I apologize if we've kept anyone past the time. Kathleen, would you make a little plug for next Wednesday night?
yes, next Wednesday night we will be talking about websites. So I mean, no, it'll be different in terms of content, but the ideas are the same. That we'll go over hopefully some sort of nuts and bolts stuff, some sort of bigger ideas stuff, and hopefully learn from one another.
Can I just ask one question? What was the rest of that name for that Vanderbilt?
Oh, it's up. We can copy it and paste it. It's up in the chat. Here.
Okay.
Are you able to see the chat?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, if you scroll up, it's the one that's Dig Library and then Vanderbilt. It's called, the name of the site, if you ever need to Google it, is Art in the Christian Tradition. If you Google Vanderbilt Art in the Christian Tradition, that'll come right up.
Thank you so much.
Kathleen, I was just going to mention one interesting thing that we've noticed at my congregation is people's family joining in Sunday worship and giving out a strange sense of togetherness for the generations who aren't necessarily able to be in person together. And, you know, I think if we have to be in a pandemic, we're lucky that we have these tools to feel connected. They're not perfect, but you know, I've seen some really lovely expressions and of connectedness and creativity, and I think it's really brought out some really amazingly talented people.
Agreed. Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. This was a great group, and it was just so good to see you and be able to spend time with you. And oh, I guess I should put my email address in there in case anyone has any sort of follow-up questions or comments. And hopefully I'll see some of you next week. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Sorry I kept you over.